A cult is a social group that lives by a strict set of rules or a belief system that is often created by the group's leader. These leaders often have persuasive personalities and have the ability to manipulate their followers into doing their bidding. So it's not surprising that these groups often commit violent crimes to forward their agenda or live a lifestyle that is frowned upon by modern society. While cults tend to live in secrecy, there have been a few moments where the head of a cult will speak out in an interview. Whether they are blatantly lying in order to try and manipulate more people, or they're confessing to their crimes, these interviews give insight into the creepy nature of these groups and the type of people that lead them. So here are 7 disturbing interviews with cult leaders. Number 1. David Berg, The Children of God. The Children of God was an organization that started in 1968 that was a religious group of people who loosely based their beliefs off of the Bible. However, their founder, David Berg, was the real rulemaker of this group and used attractive women to bait other people into joining his movement, a practice that would go on to be known as flirty fishing. This, along with some other methods, turned out to be an effective way to gain new members because by 1972, the group had over 130 communities. Controversy arose when people found out that David Berg and the Children of God advocated both incest and sex with minors. Berg himself was accused of both but was never convicted. However, these crimes definitely occurred within the group's various different communities. In an interview where Berg was asked about the Bible, specifically the 10 Commandments, he responded by stating that the only law people should follow was to love one another. This may have seemed like a nice sentiment at the time, but was actually quite a disturbing answer, as Berg and the Children of God often used answers similar to this to justify their crimes.
He said, Jesus himself said, the Son of God, in this law, he said, dwelleth all the law and all the prophets. All fulfilled in this one law. Just this one law of love fulfills all 10 and all the rest put together. So we don't need them anymore. We're no longer under the laws of Moses. We're no longer under the 10 Commandments. We're no longer under all that religious folderol and rigmarole and form and ceremony and temple worship. All you have to worship God today is your own heart.
Number 2. Rod Farrell, The Vampire Clan. Rod Farrell was an American murderer from Kentucky who was the leader of a so-called vampire cult in the mid-90s. He often told people that he was a 500-year-old vampire named Visago and became known as the Vampire Killer when, in 1996, he killed 2 people. The victims were Naomi Ruth Queen and Richard Wendorf, who were the parents of Farrell's friend Heather. Farrell beat both of them to death with a crowbar while they were in their home and burned the letter V into Richard Wendorf's body. The case became quite well known for 2 reasons, because of the details surrounding it and because Farrell became the youngest person to be sentenced to death in America. That sentence was later changed to life without parole, and since the incident, Farrell has been interviewed multiple times and has shown little to no remorse for his actions. In a documentary that was created about the incident, Farrell explains the murders in a series of weirdly worded, sometimes grammatically incorrect sentences, and seems quite proud of his actions. He also compares himself to Satan and explains being on the run as a rush that he loved, proving that he has not changed his ways and he is still as evil as the day he committed those crimes.
In a childish manner, Scott and I impishly danced around his body before he was dead. Just, strangely enough, it was a rush, a teenager's rush, to know that he was asleep and not know that we held his fate in our hands. And after we finished our foolish dance, I stood over him and began to strike his head repeatedly with a crowbar until his life was taken. I don't know whether it was my conscience or not, but it said, by doing this, you could utterly destroy your life and the life of others. And then, after all the consequences and thoughts about not doing it came through my head, one single voice came forth and said, F it. And that's whenever I brought the crowbar down.
Number 3 is Shoko Asahara, Om Shinrikyo. Shinrikyo is a Japanese doomsday cult that was established in 1984 by Shoko Asahara. The group started off as a yoga and meditation class, but Asahara quickly started implementing his beliefs into the group, and people began to follow him. The cult lived by a set of morals that were based off various different religions, and actually gained an official status of a religious organization in 1989. However, some of the beliefs in this group were more than questionable, as Asahara convinced his followers that the world was going to end and that only the members of Shinrikyo would survive the apocalypse. Shoko Asahara also claimed that he was Christ, and because of all of this, his cult was deemed to be an elitist religion that looked down on other groups and organizations. Shinrikyo gained international notoriety when they carried out the Tokyo subway sarin attack of 1995, which consisted of 10 members of the cult releasing a deadly nerve agent known as sarin gas in a Tokyo subway station during rush hour. The attack resulted in 12 deaths and hundreds more were injured because of the gas. While Asahara wasn't directly responsible for the attack, his followers based their beliefs on his teachings, and this event made him an extremely controversial figure. Shinrikyo quickly turned from being a religious organization to a terrorist group that was feared by Japanese citizens. Before this, however, Asahara was actually quite respected by certain personalities, and actually did an interview with famous actor and comedian Takashi Kitano. While he doesn't say anything too creepy, Asahara does talk about the importance of appealing to a younger demographic, which is quite disturbing considering that many of his initial followers were quite young.
だけどもやってるそういう気持ちがすごいあるんだけど、自分のテレビやなんかでいろんなとこ働いてることを考えると何をしてるんだなと思う。それを断ち切ればいいんだろうけどね、断ち切る勝負っていうのがすごい難しいですね。
いや、それはそれでいいんじゃないですかね。というのは最もある意味で大きな影響力を持たれていらっしゃる、要するにカリスマ性ですよね。カリスマ性というのは神から与えられた英知みたいなものですから、そういうことを持っていらっしゃるということは、それはなんていうのかな、特に影響力のある若者たちにいい意味で与えていかれたら、もうそれこそ素晴らしい人生になるんじゃないでしょうかね。
Number 4. Warren Jeffs, FLDS Church. The Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints is a large religious organization based in the United States that has been around since the early 20th century. It has gained notoriety for a number of reasons. These range from racist statements and homophobic remarks all the way to alleged trafficking of underage girls. However, their biggest and most public controversy came when their current president, Warren Jeffs, was charged with 2 counts of sexual assault in 2011. The victims were 2 young females, aged 12 and 15, and it confirmed most people's suspicions that Jeffs and the organization were advocates for this kind of behavior. The leader of the Fundamentalist Church has always been looked at as some kind of a prophet, and what they said was usually gospel within the community. The followers' willingness to blindly follow their leader is what gave the organization its cult-like image. Jeffs used this to his advantage and allegedly organized illegal marriages between his adult male followers and underage females. However, after Warren Jeffs was sent to prison, he made a statement to his followers, admitting that he was a false prophet and that he had been lying to his people. This is obviously quite disturbing, as he had previously used his prophet image to push his agenda and commit horrible crimes.
Anybody who wants to read this message, that they may know that I have been a liar. I am not the prophet. I never was the prophet. This is not a test. This is a revelation. Farewell. I love you.
Number 5. Charles Manson, the Manson family. Charles Manson was the leader of an American cult known as the Manson family that were responsible for the death of at least 9 people in the late 60s. Manson was considered to be a master manipulator who was able to convince a number of different women to do his bidding. These deeds usually revolved around his strange beliefs, most notably helter-skelter, which was the term he gave to a belief he had that an apocalyptic race war was on the verge of commencing. He believed that organizing these murders would speed up the process. However, after the Manson family committed a string of murders in 1969, Charles Manson was arrested and eventually was given a charge of life without parole. He remained in prison until he died in November of 2017. Before he died, Manson gave a string of interviews with various different media outlets, and the public were given an idea of how depraved, violent, and insane he truly was. In one of his most famous interviews conducted in 1989, Manson talks about an array of topics, but the most famous section of the interview comes when he is asked who he is. His response is both eerie and disturbing.
People look at you today, 20 years later, and they still have no idea what you're about. Tell me in a sentence who you are.
Nobody. I'm nobody. I'm a tramp, a bum, a hobo. I'm a boxcar and a jug of wine. And a straight razor if you get too close to me.
Number 6. Charles Diedrich, the Synanon Organization. The Synanon Organization was originally a drug rehabilitation program started by Charles Diedrich in 1958. However, because of a string of violent crimes committed by the group's members, it quickly became known as one of the most violent cults in American history. The founder, Charles Diedrich, was a reformed alcoholic who initially stated that Synanon was a non-violent organization. However, he changed his stance on that quite quickly and stated that they would only use violence when necessary. By the late 1970s, the group were attached to over 80 violent crimes, including the disappearance of Rose Lena Cole, a young woman who was supposed to enroll in the organization but went missing soon after. She has never been seen since. There are numerous clips of Diedrich talking to his followers. In one video, he answers a question from a member of the group and states that anybody who joins Synanon is not a violent person at heart. This is disturbing as it may have actually been true for most members, but we know now that Synanon's practices and Diedrich's policies may have turned various members into violent people. We also see some of Diedrich's followers praise him for a number of reasons, which is again quite disturbing as it proves that his manipulation tactics were proving to be quite effective.
When a person comes into Synanon, we do not have on our hands a potentially violent person or a rebel at all. We have then a person that is looking for boundaries. He then is looking for someone to tell him what to do, isn't he?
He's probably the most totally honest person I have ever met in my life.
I'm quite convinced that he actually knows more about me than I know about myself.
Number 7. Jim Jones, the People's Temple. The People's Temple was a religious movement started by Jim Jones. It originated in the United States but moved to the southern state of Guyana in the 1970s, forming a settlement known as Jonestown. While Jones' politics were quite controversial, the people of Jonestown seemed relatively happy. But this all began to change quite quickly, and the People's Temple was accused of a number of human rights violations. A U.S. House representative known as Leo Ryan flew to Guyana to investigate these claims, and at first, all seemed well. But because quite a few people had expressed interest in leaving, Jones assumed that Ryan was going to try and shut the settlement down. Because of this, Jones gave his followers poison and told them that they had to commit suicide because it would be a better way to go than if the CIA caught them. So, on November 18, 1978, a total of 907 people died from cyanide poisoning. Leo Ryan and 4 others were assassinated the same day, and Jim Jones shot himself shortly after. The total death tally was 918. The event was labeled as a mass suicide. However, many people, including the survivors, considered it to be a mass murder, as most of the people who injected the poison were either coerced, threatened, or force-fed the liquid. Only a day prior, when Ryan and his team were investigating the area, an NBC correspondent was handed a note that read, "Please help me get out of Jonestown." Jim Jones was confronted about this on camera and dismissed it, stating that people were not only happy, but they were allowed to come and go as they please.
Last night, someone came and passed me this note. He's the one that I'm just talking about. Yeah, this is he's talking about. This is the man that wants to leave his son here.
Doesn't it concern you, though, that this man, for whatever reason, one of the people in your group...
People play games, friend. They lie. What can I do about lies? Are you people going to leave us? I just beg you, please leave us. Bill, we will bother nobody. Anybody wants to get out of here can get out of here. We have no problem about getting out of here. They come and go all the time. I don't know what kind of game. People like people like publicity. Some people do. I don't. But some people like publicity. But if it's so damn bad, why is he leaving his son here? Can you give me a good reason for that?
And that's all for today's video. Thanks a million for watching. If you want to see videos similar to this, you can consider subscribing. My Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook are all DeBerk321, so you can follow me over there if you want to. The sources, footage used, and music featured will all be linked down below. But like I said, that's all for now. As always, until next time.